I'm not so sure that the government that came into power in South Africa had the same capacity to impose its will on the private sector that China had. Now, I might be wrong, but I don't think so. And the stake in terms of trying to get rid of the symbolic caste that apartheid had on the South African government must have had an important, it must have been an important factor in what they decided to do during the first 10 years after that old regime. Yeah.
I think you're exactly right, and let me. I'll show it with a different picture. So think about this one. Suppose I had come in as a, still wet behind the ears, new PhD, come right out of school, and said to South Africa, "Oh, you should just cut wages for everybody from that line up there down to there, and you can actually employ more workers." What the government would have said is, well, those wage cuts in mining, which were very hard fought, will be a pure windfall gain for the mine owners, who are, are mostly white and or foreign, and that will be, even if we as a government think it's a good idea, it will be politically very unpopular to offer those kind of wage cuts to the mining industry. It's really just a transfer back of some claims that black South Africans have been able to make on basically the resources in the ground. So I think you're right that they had a very difficult political challenge to manage. But I think the point is that now, given where we are, it's important to just be honest about where we've gotten to, and then just ask what can we do to move forward. So I mean, Don said this before, and I should have said it as well. I mean, the transition in South Africa is the miracle of our lifetimes. The peaceful transition from apartheid is just this miraculous event. And everyone so wants this to succeed. And the conditions from which they had to start were so difficult. But let me go back to my original point. I think if we don't talk honestly on the outside about things like the importance of that first job for that young person, we're not doing a favor to the people in the South African government who are trying to address youth unemployment. And now, without pointing blame, pointing fingers, without rewriting history, it's just now's the time to figure out what can we practically do.
Paul, talking of the mining industry, the price of gold has soared to well over $1,000 an ounce. Why does that not have a good impact on the country?
Well, the problem is that, and this was a real revision for me, for my economist colleagues. I used to use, and I think we generally tend to use, a measure like what's GDP or GDP per capita. And something like an increase in the price of gold leads to much more income in South Africa. But the problem is it doesn't lead to the extra employment. So it's as if the nation gets extra resources that get divided somehow, but you still have all this human talent which isn't getting the chance to develop through schooling or work. So the question is, how do you translate the advantage they get from higher prices for minerals? How do you translate that into jobs for the people who are unemployed? And here, the first impulse actually could be counterproductive. The tendency might be to say, let's see, yeah, if there's so much profit in the mining industry, then we should raise the wages so that the workers capture a piece of that profit. And that would be fine if you could distinguish between the wages in the mining industry versus the wages in the rest of the country. But if you have a notion of kind of fairness, which means everybody should have access to those kinds of wages, then it makes it even harder to get garment assembly started under the law. So I've really shifted from thinking that you pursue as a policymaker a strategy of maximizing the rate of GDP growth, and shifted instead to thinking the first thing you do is you maximize employment. And from a conceptual point of view, the promise is that GDP isn't measuring something really valuable that we produce. All those people in a job are producing not just say, the shirts they're sewing, but they're producing a whole bunch of skill that will serve them throughout their lifetimes and serve the whole nation. But we don't measure that when we do the statistics. And this is why I think this is part of what was so distinctively different about the Asian model, which is that they were not so focused, and many of them didn't have resources to exploit, but so they were not so focused on income as so much as just maximizing employment.
What are your recommendations or policy implications for trading partners like the U.S. government and others? Do preferential tariffs or things like the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act have a role to play, or is the gap too large?
So AGOA, anything we can do to encourage, through AGOA is a program which gives some kind of tariff concessions, anything we can do to encourage growth and employment throughout sub-Saharan Africa, or for that matter, throughout the developing world, is well worth doing. And we do, as a nation, have a kind of separate issue to solve about our overall trade imbalance and what kinds of things we do compared to what kinds of things other parts of the world do. I think we should be very open to the idea that there are some activities like sewing shirts, sewing shoes, weaving textiles. It should be fine if those activities move offshore from the United States and go to other places, because that's the way that growth really will take off in the rest of the world, and we'll ultimately be so much better off if the rest of the world has the kind of rapid income growth that China has had. So that means we have to be willing as a nation to say, okay, we'll just keep moving up the skill ladder and into other kinds of activities besides textiles and garments. And we've generally been a leader around the world in this, and pushing for free trade, for originally the multi-fiber agreement, and then later the reductions in tariffs. So I think our job there has been we can be proud of what we've done as a nation in that area, but there's room to do a little bit more. Unfortunately, though, at some point there isn't that much we can do from the outside except just speak honestly to a country we really deeply care about the future of and say there's a very important issue here of inclusion that has to be addressed.
I was just wondering, why can't South Africa, for instance? I've spent some time there, and there are trade unions, COSATU. Why don't they differentiate between the industries? Because obviously, at $1,200 an ounce for gold, the mining companies are making a ton of money, and you say, fine, the wages of the workers in the mines, which is also a highly dangerous occupation, should be significantly higher than those who are in light manufacturing.
So the unions and the business people that I talked to all said that they already do that. And they all said that there were no binding minimum wages in South Africa. And I was just told that over and over again, I think with real conviction by everybody I spoke with. They also said it was just impossible for South Africa or any African nation to compete with China. It was just sort of taken as a statement of fact. But the experience in Newcastle just completely undercuts both of those assertions. People in South Africa were willing to compete with China, and firms could compete successfully. People were willing to work with those firms. But then these supposedly differentiated union arrangements and minimum wage arrangements are putting all of those firms out of business. So I think there's a certain amount of denial amongst well-intentioned people there about what's really going on. But buzzkill.